Cool. So thanks again for all of you that could join us today. My name is Bethany Steinken. I am the Program Support Coordinator for the Montana After School Alliance. And I would also like my colleague Katie to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie Johnson. I'm the Vista for MTAA, and I'm the mastermind behind all things communication and database related. So if you see any social media posts or emails, they probably come from me. So please follow us on social media, and I hope you enjoyed today's call.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. All right, let's get rolling. So I am going to share my screen. Get this party started. So as I said, I'm Bethany with the After School Alliance, and we just wanted to invite you all here today to talk a little bit about this incredible grant that we have all been given. Just let me double check quick before we get rolling. Katie, you can admit people into the webinar, can't you? Sweet, thank you. So as you're joining us, welcome. And we just wanted to go over some of the bigger questions about this Coronavirus Relief Funds grant that we have received. And thank you to those of you that have submitted questions already. That helps kind of guide us for this call today. And then what I'm going to do is initially show you, go over some of the guidance, talk to you guys about some of the big questions that we've been having. And then at the very end, we'll go ahead and take your questions. As I'm presenting this, go ahead and feel free to put questions in the chat box. And Katie will be able to kind of keep track of those, and we will address those after this brief presentation. Also, if you have already submitted a question via our form and have not yet heard back from me, I apologize, but I will get back to everybody individually as I'm able. As you can imagine, there's a lot going on right now. So let's get started. Some of you are very familiar with our organization, but if you are not, our mission at the Montana After School Alliance is to support and advocate for after school programs, which includes before school and on the weekends and summers. And right now, a lot of it is also including during school time because of sort of altered every other day type schedules. Anytime that kids are not in school, those programs that are addressing the needs of those students and families, we are here to support those programs all across the state. And we believe that all youth in Montana deserve to have access to enriching after school activities in a safe and healthy environment. And a quick note, MTAA is not the administrator for this grant, so we have no control over the funding. The grant is part of the larger coronavirus relief funds that were designated by the CARES Act at the federal level. So the State Department of Public Health and Human Services is the administrator of this grant, and MTAA is providing assistance in answering questions about your grant, and anything that we can't answer, we'll check in with DPHHS and see if we can get an answer for you. So some of the questions that I've received is how do I send you my money back? How do I send you this? You're not sending anything to us, okay? So we're just here to help answer some of these questions and provide you a little extra information. Some of the questions we may not be able to answer, and we'll direct those to the DPHHS. So we want to get started with a little question. Are you worried about how to spend all of your funds prior to December 30th? So if you can just take a quick second to answer that question, and we will see, that'll help us gauge kind of where we are with our participants today. All right, looks like we've got most folks in. So this is what we have. An overwhelming majority of you are concerned, which is great. You're in the right place. It's not great, but you're in the right place because we can hopefully help answer some of your questions and give you a little bit more confidence in how you're going to be spending these funds. So today's agenda, like I mentioned, we're going to go over some eligible and ineligible expenses. We're going to talk about some resources that you have in this grant. We'll briefly touch on reporting. Most of your interim reports were due this last Monday. And then, like I said, at the very end, we will take questions from everyone. So just to kind of get the big picture, the purpose of this grant is to assist you in mitigating impacts to your program due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that is going to set the framework for all of our questions about how we can spend the funding. And then there's just a couple of great places to find what those eligible and ineligible expenses are. And one is your grant contract. And so I'll go ahead and show you guys how to find that. So when you go on to Submittable and you have your different grants that you have and different things you've applied for through Submittable, then they're all listed there. So we're gonna go into the school age childcare grant. I also run the Stevens Youth Center in White Sulphur Springs. So this is another way you can see some of these grants. So when you're looking in here, you've got on your forms tab, there's your grant, there's the interim report, some of the additional paperwork that you had to fill out. And then down here at the bottom is your contract. And it's really good. This is something that you all read when you agreed to accept the funding for this grant and signed. And it's really good anytime you're going over reporting on a grant to go back, reread your application, reread the contract, and make sure that everything you're reporting on lines up with what you said you were going to do. And if you scroll down a little ways, you'll see about funded activities here, and then ineligible expenditures. So you can see a list right there of things that this grant will not cover. And so that's one place that you can get it. The other place, Katie is gonna put in the chat box the federal FAQs, and those are not specific to the child care grant, but those are over all of the CRF funds and grants. But you can also find it, sorry if I'm making you dizzy. If you received this email in the messages on the tab, oh, sorry, this is the DPHHS specific FAQs you can find here in the messages on your tab that will answer some of your questions. And then, sorry, back at, if you already have your interim grant report, at the very top of that as well, there you can find the federal guidance. When you click that link, it'll open a PDF that has some more federal guidance on questions that you may have about eligible expenses. So these are just some of the eligible expense, we call them buckets. So you can, payroll is one of the things. They'll ask you in your reporting, how much money did you spend on payroll? For this grant in particular, there's this awesome feature that you can offset tuition and fees for families that are participating in your program, so they don't have to pay anything to be able to participate. Equipment is another bucket, and that's anything that you spend on that's greater than $5,000. And supplies is anything that's less than $5,000. And then there's a couple other in the other category, some of the things that are okay to spend money on, but it is really important to note that you cannot prepay any 2021 expenses. Your expenses must be incurred between March 1st and December 30th of this year. So you can't say, pay a 2021 program fee for your kids out of this funding. That would be an ineligible expense. And you also cannot subgrant funds. So you can't, your organization, if you receive the funding, cannot give funding out to other programs. Some other helpful information on this grant, if you need the CFDA number, it's here. It's also at the top of your grant report in Submittable. And then this is a biggie. I know we're kind of used to maybe flexing some deadlines, but this is a hard and fast deadline. You cannot spend any money of this grant after December 30th. And so all of, as we mentioned before, expenses must be incurred between the period of March 1st and December 30th of this year. None of this funding isn't flexible after the 30th of December, which is a bummer, but we just got to play by the rules, and that's what they are. When you are accounting for how you spend your grant money, please ensure that you're not overlapping with any other state or federal CARES Act funding or any other sources of funding. So double dipping, so to speak. Like if you paid your staff through the Paycheck Protection Program in April, May, and June, you can't use this funding to then cover those same expenses. So you only paid your staff once. You can only designate that funding to one or other bucket of this CARES Act funding. Also, some more helpful information. You're not required to submit copies of receipts for the report that you just did, but you do need to hang on to those receipts because there's a chance that either your program could be audited or the DPHHS may be requested to come back and do some monitoring of how funding was spent. They may come back and say, we want to see how you spent this money beyond just the reporting piece. And your final report will be due no later than January 30. So there's been some confusion over the two deadlines. December 30 is your deadline to spend the funding, and then January 30 is your deadline to have your final report completed. And if you have any technical issues specifically with Submittable, with the forms, or if you can't get into your account, that's not something that we can help you with. That's not something DPHHS can help you with. That's something that you do need to go directly to support@submittable.com for any questions that you might have about your actual account with Submittable. So as we mentioned, the interim report was due on Monday, so hopefully everybody got those in a timely fashion. And if you have not yet received funding, you will only need to submit a final report. If you received funding just within the last handful of weeks, you probably didn't receive an interim report and you will only need to submit a final report as well. In that final report, if your program received 50,000 or more in total CRF funding, then you will be required to submit a general ledger. And that's going to go through all of how you spent all of that funding for all of your different grants. Excuse me. And I can tell you that I am not an accountant. Accounting is not my forte. So I will be very hard pressed to answer any questions that you may have on a general ledger or that final report. However, Montana Nonprofit Association, which is an excellent organization throughout the state, can help. And so we will go quick and I will show you that. And Katie can also put that link in the chat. So we'll go here. So they have this COVID-19 Relief Fund reporting page. And on here, you can see they hosted a couple of town halls last week about the interim report, but it'll have good questions and answers as you're completing your final report as well. And the slides from their town hall are there. If you have questions about the grant reporting process, you can submit a question to them there. And then this last part is pretty awesome. You can sign up for 30 minutes of individual help from Montana Nonprofit Association to help you actually go through your grant reporting and help you understand how to get some of those funds allotted appropriately and how to represent that in your general ledger or in your accounting system. And then they also have frequently asked questions that are updated here about the reporting and other questions. And that's super awesome. And then they have also worked with 2 accounting firms that if you need help trying to figure out the general ledger and all of that, you can connect with Anderson Zermulin or Whitley to get accounting expertise on how to work through that general ledger and get all of the pieces represented appropriately. They are charging a fee for that, but they're trying to make it as affordable as they can. And if you get those accounting services prior to December 30th and paid for prior to December 30th, the accounting service would also be an eligible expense. So you could charge that fee to this grant as well, so long as it is incurred prior to December 30th. So this next part is thanks to the questions that you guys have been filtering to us, we have compiled some guidance. And here is our website that you can see that guidance on. Our FAQ document is not there just yet, but I'm going to quick show you how you can get there. And then probably after this call or later today or tomorrow, we'll get that up there. So here is our beautiful website that our dear Vista Katie has been working so hard on and has made it absolutely gorgeous. And if you come over here to resources and then down to the COVID-19 guidance, we'll click on that. There is all kinds of great guidance about COVID-19 and how to do that in your out of school time program. And if you scroll about halfway down the page, right here is where you're going to have all of those FAQs and those resources. So let's go ahead and go over a couple of our questions. So what is the period for these funds? The coronavirus relief funds must be incurred during the period of March 1 through December 30, like we mentioned before, but it's really important. So we wanted to hit on that one more time. Another question that we see a lot is, can I make changes to my original budget? If, as with all things now, you may have applied for this funding in August or September, maybe even before school started. You didn't know if your kids were going to be in school in person or doing virtual learning. A lot of things may have changed since you first submitted your application and requested these funds. And so long as you're covering eligible expenses from March 1st to December 30th that are helping you mitigate any impacts to your program from COVID, you are able to change some of that spending in your budget. It doesn't have to exactly line up with what you initially said you were going to do, but it does have to be an eligible expense within the time frame and within the scope of your grant. There were also some questions. DPHHS at this time does not have the capacity to approve any purchases over $5,000. That is referenced in your contract, but it's not something that they are able to do right now. So getting approval for any of the equipment over $5,000 is, even though it's in your grant, that's not something that you have to do right now. Another great question is, can I use these funds to reimburse tuition and fees to parents of the children in your program? And yes, absolutely. You can reimburse parents for monthly or annual tuition fees that were paid for that March 1 to December 30th timeframe again. And touching back on prepaying, you cannot prepay fees beyond December 30th. So you can't, again, use these funds to pay for 2021 tuition or fees. And I know a lot of you have really incredible staff that have been working super hard and paying and doing a lot of extra work, putting in a lot of extra hours, and you want to give them some sort of acknowledgement of that. So this is another one that's kind of a gray area. If it's justified due to mitigating or addressing the current COVID-19 situation, a bonus through wages or a stipend is possible if you're using it as hazard pay. And the hazard pay is defined as additional pay for performing hazardous duty or work involving physical hardship related to COVID. So if your employees are required to be in person with participants, they're accepting a greater risk than if they're sitting at home. So you cannot give a bonus for just because we're in a pandemic. That's not really what these funding sources are used for. And another one is retention pay. If you're working to make sure you can keep those employees, that's another potential use if it's justified because you're mitigating the current COVID-19 situation. Gift cards is another question that people have been asking, and again, sort of a gray area. Purchasing gift cards is allowed, but they cannot be spent on alcohol or tobacco. So you're gonna have to come up with a way to guarantee if you purchase a grocery store gift card or a gas station gift card that the funding has to be restricted on the use of those gift cards, that they cannot have alcohol or tobacco purchases. If you cannot guarantee the alcohol or tobacco will not be purchased, then you cannot use the gift cards as an eligible expense. What if you don't think you can spend all of your funding? That's okay. But as soon as you know that that's what's likely going to happen, reach out to DPHHS as soon as you can and arrange to return your funds or whatever funding you don't think you can spend. That will not reflect poorly on you or jeopardize any future funding if there is any. And what it will do, though, is give other programs in Montana the potential to be allocated those fundings here in the state before the end of the year. Any funding that is not spent or reallocated in Montana by December 30 will go back to the Fed. Okay, that was me talking for a long time. So let's see, and I'm gonna quit sharing just for a while so I can see you guys. And I'm going to ask Katie first, who was collecting questions, to go ahead and start reading those. We'll see how we can get through those questions in the chat. And then I think I forgot to have a timepiece. I think we could have time to ask some additional questions. So Katie, what do you got?
Okay, so we had a question back at the very beginning about the 500 or 5,000 being total or per item, and I have been told that it's per item. So there's that one. Let's see. Okay, so one question was that they estimated how many kids would be served when they applied for the grant, but what will happen if they are short of that number?
That's a great question, and that is one that we have been hearing as well. And that's something I think that you just need to indicate in your reporting in one of the questions about how you're mitigating COVID-19 impacts, and you can adjust there. We thought we were going to serve this many kids, but we couldn't find staff, or we couldn't our school closed and wouldn't let us access the building, or, you know, whatever the reason is, I think just explain that. I think we all know that nothing is going according to plan, or at least that's the way it feels.
Okay. So if another shutdown occurs or student numbers have to drop, does anything happen to the funding, or do they need to make any adjustments? Similar question, but
Yeah,
specific to coronavirus.
yeah, and again, so the purpose of these funds is to help mitigate those circumstances, and shutting down is a circumstance. And what I think, and I can double check on that, the biggest intention for these funds is to make sure that that program is available if and when it's needed. So if you are able, if your school shuts down, but you're able to still serve kids, or to be maybe, I think, remotely, or just keep the wheels moving so that the program would be available should schools reopen. I think that those expenses, I believe, would qualify still. But it is going to change your final budget. And again, if you don't think that you can spend all of that funding due to a circumstance like that, I would get a hold of DPHHS and see if you can send some of that money back. Anything else? I'm sure there's others, Katie.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi was
That's
slow.
good. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so another question. We can go back until March 1st on payroll, supplies, and tuition to reimburse families, correct? Even if they applied for the grant in, say, September.
Yes. So I know a lot of us, when we applied for this grant in particular, the childcare grant, initially said that you would expend your funds from June 1 to December 30. So it's expected that that's the time frame that you spend, that you utilize these funds. However, if you've, you know, gone through QuickBooks and everything that is an eligible expense, you're able to put in that June to December timeframe, and you still have some funding left over, then it's okay to go back to March 1st with those eligible funds, so long as they are not overlapping with other funding sources that you've already used to pay those expenses. And I will say again, because we are not the funder or the administrator of this grant, if there's anything that I say today that we'll double check with DPHHS and make sure everything that I said is accurate. If it's not, we'll include that information on our paid coronavirus resources page that we showed you, any updates or changes. I think one of the ways that I always have thought of this as a grantee for different grants that I have received for my program is that at the end of the day, you need to have the proof that you spent the money the way that it was intended to be spent. If somebody comes back to audit you or does a monitoring visit to see how you spent the funds, and you're like, well, Bethany told me that this is how I could spend the funds, that they're not going to care if I told you one way or the other. So what's most important is to look at the information that was sent to you through Submittable with the grant, any messages that were sent in there, any federal guidance that you have, and then at the end of the day, you have to decide for your program, was that the correct use of the funds? So that's sort of our disclaimer. What else you have, Katie?
So because expenses have to be paid by December 30th, what if they have invoices in late December that are paid before the January 30th reporting deadline? Are those eligible?
I don't think so. It's like I said, it's a hard and fast deadline. The expenses have to be incurred and paid for prior to December 30th. So you're gonna want to, if you have those invoices, you're gonna want to send them out earlier in December, and just make sure anyone that you want to get paid knows that you have to have that money back by December 30 in order, or you have to have, yeah, you have to have it paid for by December 30.
So there are a lot of questions regarding tuition. So if I don't cover your question specifically, I'm just going to kind of broaden them in general. But there are a few questions in regards to recording tuition, if they offer services for free, or if they pay part, or if they reimburse families for part of the tuition and then they have money left over, those sorts of questions.
So I don't think, we might need to get some more guidance on specific questions, but as a rule, my understanding is if you have families that paid you tuition or program fees for their students, they're used to a 10-year program from March 1st through December 30th, that money that they have already paid would be refundable to them. I don't think that if your program is free, that you can give a payment back to a parent, because there wouldn't be any paper trail of why you were just giving them money. It has to be a reimbursement of funds that they have already spent in your program. That feel like it hits a couple of those, Katie?
Yes.
Okay.
And then there was another question on reporting the tuition within the report, how to include that.
There, and the interim report and the final report is going to be pretty similar. And there was a question there. There's a, excuse me, there's a like a dollar amount you can fill in to say this is how much money I spent to offset tuition, program, and fees. And then there is also a question box that you can fill in that explains how you use that money to offset your tuition and fees. So that's where you would put your dollar amount in for money that you spent in that category, and then explain it in the sort of box down below.
Okay. There are some other questions about seeing an example of the reports for those who did not do the interim reports. Is that something you want to cover right now?
That is a great question. Let me see if we can get a copy of it to put up on our website with the rest of this information. And then I think that might be a good spot for it, or unless they've got a spot where it's on the DPHHS website. I'm not sure.
Okay, here's another question. Can we use funds for school-age kids that we have given scholarships to as well as staff wages?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Can we use funds for school-age kids that we have given scholarships to as well as for staff wages?
I think so. I think you don't, I guess I'm not sure that I understand that question. For students that you give scholarships to, so like if you're looking back at those bigger buckets, that would go in the offset tuition and fees, and then paying staff wages would go into the payroll bucket. So they're not, those things are, I think, both allowed for the as eligible expenses for these funds. So I guess I'm not sure. Yeah, you don't have to spend all of the funds in one particular area. I did see, just because it popped up and I could actually see it, that Montana Nonprofit Association has a copy of the report on their website, maybe.
Okay. Another question, or a couple of questions, are regarding low income care and the scholarships around that and the percentages. There's some with the 25% scholarships and things like that. Can you speak to the lower income group of children?
Sure. So one of the pieces of this funding was specifically you had to say how you would target at least 25% low-income students would be served by your programs. And DPHHS didn't set up parameters on how you would do that or how you would report it. They were really generous in letting you figure out how you were going to do that. And so that's really, I think, a huge aim of these funds is to help ensure that those kids that might be at a higher risk are being served in this state. So whatever you can do to help get more of those programs or those families served by your programs, if you have extra funding, that's a great way to spend it. See if there's ways that you can really reach out to the low-income families in your community and make sure that they are getting services through your program. Hopefully that helps.
Okay, so here is a COVID-specific issue. Are portable classrooms an allowable purchase if we need to accommodate for more space to follow social distancing requirements?
So anything that you need to do to mitigate impacts of COVID-19 is an allowable expense. So if that's something that you're doing to mitigate social distancing, that should be an allowable expense.
Can the funds be used for safety features of the facility to like renovate or add to make things?
So it has to tie back to COVID-19. So if you're, I think that is gonna have to do, my guess would be no, but it has to tie back to mitigating COVID-19 impacts.
Can they claim part-time students in their care? If they
see why not.
they originally, if they originally came like all week, but now they're only coming a portion of the week.
Again, I think that falls under everything keeps changing. But I think that's okay, and you can address that in your final report why some of those numbers may have changed. Just to kind of speak, I don't know if this is the question or the aim of that question. The formula for this grant was $1,000 per day per student, but that does not, there's no caveat that you have to serve those kids 8 hours a day. So if that's the question, it's still $1,000 per day per student, no matter how many hours a day you see those kids.
Okay, this question is in regards to recording different types of funds. If they put funds away for future shutdowns or to accommodate for COVID-related situations, they're wondering how they record that.
I'm gonna say you can't. All of your funds, any money that you are using for this out of this fund has to be spent. You have to have a receipt, a traceable way to say, this is what I spent this money on. So stockpiling it, as great as that would be and as helpful as that would be, is not allowable. So anything that you don't actually spend prior to December 30th will have to go back to DPHHS and then back to the federal government. And again, that's something that you can get more guidance from any of the accounting questions from MNA or Anderson, Zermulin, and Whipley.
This is specific to a group home provider. They're wondering if their income counts towards payroll since they're directly working with the children.
So that's a great question, and I'm sorry I didn't get back to you yet. I saw your question in our form, and I may just need to follow up and find out a little bit more about that. If your group home applied for this funding for the school age childcare grant, and your group home is paying you as an employee, then that would be an allowable expense, I believe. But I will, I have your email and your phone number, and I will follow up with you individually as well.
So with retention and or hazard pay, does this apply to the staff members that directly serve the children, or could it apply to all staff in terms of a child care center?
So again, the definition of the hazard pay is in the frequently asked questions at the federal level. And it is that they have to incur an additional risk. And so that is the definition of hazard pay. So again, just because we're in a pandemic, you cannot pay hazard pay to everyone across the board. They have to be incurring an additional risk that they would not otherwise incur in their job due to COVID-19.
And then the last one that I've been able to record and keep track of, with the $1,000 per day per student, does it matter if they are the same students coming each day?
No.
So
it doesn't matter. No. So like if you have 30 kids coming to your program each day, that's 30 kids on Monday, 30 kids on Tuesday, 30 kids on Wednesday. So if it's the same or not, that doesn't matter as much as how many kids you are serving. And there's part of the reporting then too does ask that you submit your attendance records and let them know on average how many kids attended every day. So it's, yeah, not tied to a specific kid.
And then one question about reports. Will they be receiving feedback on their reports?
That's a great question.
Y'all get an A.
What's that?
I said
y'all get an A. Yeah, we are, again, not administering the grant, so we can find out if that's something that you will be receiving feedback from DPHHS.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to allow people to unmute themselves or re-enter their question into the chat. I've tried to keep track of all of them, but if I, for some reason, missed you, now is the time to ask Miss Bethany.
Hi, Bethany. This is
Hi,
Kaylee. So I guess I'm just kind of confused, and I'm so glad that you're doing this Zoom to help me understand a little bit more. So is it $1,000 per kid per month, or $1,000 per kid per day?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question.
I'm really confused about that. It was my understanding it was $1,000 per kid per month.
Let me see. We might, my recollection month sounds right.
Okay.
And that's not what I said, is it? We will get clarification on that, Kaylee, and I also have your contact information. I can share that with you, and then we can also include that on our website.
Okay, perfect. And then I had one more question, if you don't
Mhm.
mind. So
Yeah.
I have a couple of part-time older kiddos, and if it's $1,000 per month and their tuition is only 400, what are we supposed to do with that leftover 600 per month? Do we pocket that, or is that the amount we need to send back to, um, you know?
So my understanding is that that was a formula to help you determine what kind of funding you would need. So I think if you have other expenses that you are above and beyond the $400 per day that fit within those parameters, you're using them to mitigate COVID-19 impacts. They fit in the eligible expenses. They were incurred between March 1st and December 30th. I don't believe that all of the funding has to go specifically to student tuition or program fees. So, but if there is, like, if you have more than what you need to run your program, then that would go back to DPHHS. There is no pocketing of funds because they have to be spent. So,
Okay, that makes sense.
does that help?
Yeah, that makes sense. I just was confused because there were some other providers that I've spoken to that are like, no, you take the 1,000. If our tuition is 700, then we can give that tuition back to that family, and then keep the 300 or whatever as our pay. And I just I was confused about that.
Okay. So I think that part of it, not necessarily tuition, but let's say that your expenses go to run the program. Maybe you charge the kids $400, but it takes more money than that to fund the program, and you get that funding through other sources. This funding does not just cover tuition, it covers the expenses to run your program. So the way I think of it, like I said, I'm not an accountant, but when I'm using QuickBooks, I would just say, I paid my staff for this 2 weeks, and that funding would be like color coded.
Okay.
CARES Act, so you can balance out your expenses that way. Is that clear as mud?
Yep. Yep. That makes more sense.
Okay. Super. Thank you.
We did have another question pop in about being a business owner.
Mhm.
If you're a business owner, does eligible pay include pay for the owner?
I mean, I guess that's a good question, because I guess again, I'm not an accountant, so I don't know for sure how your business is structured. But again, I can only go back to saying the costs that are incurred to run your program and mitigate COVID-19 impacts are eligible expenses. So I would guess that's okay.
Okay, so I have a question.
Right.
I have a home-based childcare, and since COVID hit, I have been crazy. I've taken in extra kids. Would I be considered paying myself hazard pay for that?
I would think so. I think yeah, I know. And I'm just going to keep sounding like a broken record, because honestly, that's what I've got for you guys. Like, we don't set up the rules. We just are following the federal guidelines and the state guidelines. Right. And so anything that it takes to run your program that is mitigating those COVID-19 would be an eligible expense.
Okay, because I have 2 children out right now due to quarantine
Yeah.
from their parents being in jobs, so I could use this funding to cover their like week and a half, 2 week gone, correct?
I would think so.
Okay.
And I would also, like depending on the funding that you have, if we can get some of this money back into pockets of families and parents, that just makes the communities better as a whole. And then you can use this funding to cover the expenses for your program. I think those are sort of the dual purpose of some of the of returning extra money that you have to families, but still making sure that you cover your expenses so long as they're
Okay.
eligible. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Sort of. Okay. And I will be giving you guys my contact information, and you will have access to that to our website so that you can see any additional answers. We're trying to keep track of everything, and we'll try to update that.
Okay, I guess I'm just stressing because we have literally a month and 2 weeks left to spend this, so it's
Mhm.
like, okay,
Yep, it is stressful. I absolutely hear you. So that's part of the reason that we wanted to do this call today. And we will be doing another call closer to the final reporting deadline in December. And I will post that up here too when we're done answering questions, so that you guys, if you are having additional questions in the next couple of weeks, and we'll also continue to have that form open that you guys can keep submitting questions, and I'll keep trying to get back to you on that as well.
okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hey, this is Sasha.
Hey, Sasha.
How's it going?
All right. And I did see your questions as well.
Oh, awesome. Very good. Very good. So I guess I just wanted a little clarification.
Sure.
So with our program, we offer sliding scale, and then full scholarships.
Mhm.
And so that is an expense that is absorbed through the nonprofit. And so if the grant is covering those scholarships, does that money then that normally, like I said, gets absorbed in the nonprofit somehow, now we're taking more kids, does that money then have to be budgeted out to a different area of the COVID-19 grant to be spent by the end of December? So then
That's
there's
a-
like zero money in the bank if you had $20,000 of scholarships.
Right. That's a great question. That, Sasha, I don't remember if that one was in the form that you included, but that one I think I will have to get some more clarification on and get back to you on that as well.
Okay, yeah, that would be amazing, because it's definitely something that we face, and I know that some others face with offering
Yeah.
those, that now we have money that would normally use to kind of cushion the program has to go, and so it affects how many kids we can continue to serve.
And yeah, and my guess on that too is that would be another good question also for the Montana Nonprofit Association or one of the accounting firms might be able to better answer that question.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And thanks, Katie, for your message. I see it right there.
Bonnie, go ahead. You have a little bit of time. She's had her hand
Perfect.
raised for a while.
I was wondering, I found air purifiers that are supposed to be COVID cleansing of the air. Would that be considered supplies and I could purchase them?
Yeah, and I would believe so. Again, anything that you do to mitigate, and that's definitely, we want to keep that air as clean as we can. So that would be, I believe, an allowable expense.
Okay, so I have another question with that. So there's 4 large rooms. I'm 5,000 square feet in my facility. So I have 4 large rooms, like only putting 2 in a room where the school age kids, it makes absolutely no sense. Can I purchase them for my entire center, or do I have to purchase the additional ones on my own funding?
That's a good question. I may have to get some clarification on that. Do they do the kids move between the rooms at all ever, or are some of the rooms specific school day or school age and some are specific early ed?
So I would say there's a couple of them that are specific, like our infant room, like they have no business in there, but they do kind of move amongst two of the main rooms, I guess.
Okay. My gut is that it would only be an eligible expense for the school aged area of your facility, but let me double check. And again, I'll give my contact information here in a second, and then you can reach out as well. And we will have this recorded. We had the call set from 1 to 2, but I'm happy to take questions for maybe about 10 more minutes. But let me do this quick. Oh yeah, I forgot. We have another poll. This is a problem. Whoop, now it disappeared. Poll number 2. So let's just to kind of get a picture, and we'll keep taking questions. So go ahead and answer this poll, but I will keep taking questions. So after listening to me yabber at you for a while, do you feel any more confident that you will be able to appropriately spend your grant funds? And then we can kind of see how that goes, and that will be a measure of how much more information we need to get out to you guys.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know this may be a little bit repetitive, and I'm just writing some things down to clarify and just make sure that I'm doing the right thing. So, other than reimbursing tuition, we can use this on like a certain percentage of our mortgage, our utilities, payroll that we've already paid since March 1st, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is like a new computer okay for an older kid? Is cleaning supplies like, Clorox, whatever, wipes, that type of stuff. I just want to make sure, obviously I don't want to do anything wrong on this. So it's kind of just a little
So again, I'll give my broken record routine, and any expense that fits in those allowable that does not say ineligible in your contract, so long as you're using the funds to mitigate COVID-19. So cleaning supplies for sure, and then some of the other, like computers are an allowable expense, but again, it has to fit within those parameters.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and share the results, which are relatively mixed. So it shows us that we've got some questions answered, and then we still have a little ways to go, which we are cool with. We will carry on. Like I said, we'll go ahead and keep answering questions for a few more minutes, and then I'm not sure because I haven't looked at the chat in a while. Katie, did you share the form, the link to the form for questions?
I did. So for those unaware, we do have a database that allows us to keep track of all of the programs in the state of Montana, and it's really important for us to have that data. So if you haven't gotten a chance, I'll put the link in the chat again, but be sure to fill that out and we could stay connected, and also make sure that your program is in our mapping system so that families in the area, want to find you, you're on that map. And then Bethany, I do have another question about reporting that came through. They want to know if you've already submitted the interim report, but want to pay back pay for payroll or rent/utilities for July and August. Can you resubmit the report?
I don't know that you can resubmit the report. I feel like maybe a separate question is if it's okay to back pay after you've submitted the report. So let me figure out if if there's a way, and Katie, are you keeping track of at least names for who is asking questions? Is that, or do we just have
That's
questions?
just the question.
Okay, I think we've got the chat. I think that we can save, and maybe we can check back in with specific questions. But again, feel free, my email address is on there and my cell phone, and we can connect, send me your email, and I can check in with you that way. And then the other form besides the database, Katie, the link for the form if they still have questions. So we will have to sign off here shortly. But if you still have questions, the best way that you can get us is through the link that Katie just
Stop, Asher!
that Katie just put in the chat box. And I saw Heather, I think somebody had a hand raised that popped up. Maybe?
Can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
This is Porter here. Yeah, I had a question about, filling in the interim report, did the best I could. But with this information today, I would probably go back and make some changes. I anticipated a decent chunk sending back to the state.
Okay.
But, if I can reimburse families for some of the costs or fees they paid this summer, I would certainly do so.
Yeah.
But I didn't indicate that on my interim report. So I guess my understanding was that the final report was kind of the final say. The interim was more to give them idea where we're at. And I can't imagine they'd expect those numbers to hold fast and true to the final report. But that would be a critical question for me as well.
Okay.
Like, as you said, I can fully justify everything and show the money trail.
Right.
But I don't want them to come back and say, well, you said in your interim report
Yes.
only this much, so.
Yeah, and I think I think like my gut on it says for whatever my gut is worth that I think you're on the right track, that you can that so long as it's an allowable expense, it's not gonna matter as much that your interim and your final report.
Is there a way that we or you could clarify that with the state?
You bet.
I think that'd be a critical question for many of us.
Yep, I agree. So we'll make sure that that gets included in our frequently asked questions on our resource page as well.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, so I think, whoops, nope, I still want this one up. Too many things going on here on this little page. But I do think we'll need to wrap up here pretty quickly. The easiest way to get a hold of me and ask those questions is through that form that Katie put in the chat box. That way it all ends up in a spreadsheet for me and I can keep track of who I've answered and who I haven't answered. And it makes a really nice, clean way that we can put together a document with additional frequently asked questions and make sure that that stays updated. Earlier, I tried to see there were 2 people with raised hands. I can't see who you are. So if those 2 people that had their hands raised still have a question, we'll take those 2 questions and then we'll probably sign off for today. We will be doing another call on Wednesday, December 9th at 10 a.m. Again, that call will be recorded and both of those recordings will be on our website where I showed you under the COVID-19 resources, and there will likely be a link on the main page as well, both to register for the next call. And then also, if you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, you'll get more updates when these kinds of calls are being shared. And if you sign up for our newsletter, which you can do on our website as well, that will help make sure you kind of stay in the loop for these types of calls and other resources that we might have. So do we have our other 2 people that had their hand raised?
Yes, this is Cassie Meixner. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Cassie?
Good. So I have a couple of questions. The first one is, how do we get those reports? I haven't received funds yet. Are they going to
Yep.
go over submittable or an email? How will we have access?
Yep, great question. So if you haven't received funds yet, you won't have an interim report at all. You will only have your final report. And I'm not sure, we haven't heard when those will be available, but it would be, it will come to you through submittable.
Okay. And then I offered scholarships for 2 school-age kids, which I didn't charge them anything.
Okay.
So if I make an invoice up for that, is that considered reimbursable there?
That's another great question that I think that I need to follow up on, is how how you would sort of quantify that scholarship funding and if that's allowable or not. So let me see what I can find out, and we will include that in our frequently asked questions as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Those were the 2 top questions I have.
Awesome.
I think Heather is the last person.
All
with
right,
her.
Heather, let's hear it.
How about Brenda?
Okay,
Hi,
how about Brenda?
thanks.
Maybe Heather is gone.
It's okay. So when I filled out, I can't find myself, sorry.
All right.
Okay, when I filled out the form, it specifically said to use the funds for scholarships for kids at 75%.
Was that the school age grant, or was that some of the other childcare funding?
No, the school age grant, I believe, said to use these funds to scholarship, especially, you know, the lower income in my area.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out how to, and I have like all of their invoices showing that I only charge them 25% or I charge them nothing. But now I'm trying to figure out how to invoice that, because that money basically just paid us the monies that we would have been getting from them.
Right.
So I think that sometime I've heard that question a little bit today. So I'm just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, for sure. That's one that we will clarify with DPHHS and include that on our frequently asked questions on our website, because that's a really important question that we need to get figured out. So I'm sorry,
Perfect.
I don't have a better answer for you right now, but we will make sure that we get that addressed.
No, hey, we appreciate you. Thanks.
You bet. Okay, so I think that's all we've got right now. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your specific question. Again, please do reach out, submit your question through those forms, and I will try to get a hold of you. And if we don't have your questions addressed specifically on our frequently asked questions, we'll still try to get to you individually. And then if there are questions that we cannot answer, Katie did put in the chat as well, the best way to contact DPHHS is at the email address reliefapps.covid@mt.gov if you need specific clarification that you can't get from us or from any of the frequently asked questions that we shared with you today. So I will try to, we'll get this recording up, we'll get the frequently asked questions up, and we will continue to update those FAQs as questions come in and we're able to get clarification. And then hope you guys can join us on Wednesday, December 9th. And just want to say a great big thank you to all of the work that you are all doing to serve the youth in Montana. So thanks so much. Have a great day. We'll see you in December.